You're listening to the ReThreading Madness podcast, which airs live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We are recorded and produced on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to our show.
I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through.
You're listening to ReThreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox. Today's show comes with a trigger warning. Not that it should. We are going to talk about sex. It will be a frank conversation about sex and its impact on our mental health. That said, not all of us have the same sensibilities, and in the spirit of ensuring everyone is okay with today's topic, I would like to say that some of what we talk about may be triggering for some folks. Sex is a primary human need, along with food, shelter, and water. However, somewhere along the line here in our society, sex was dropped off that list. I suppose we think that since we don't die from a lack of sex, as we might food, water, or shelter, it was perceived as not a need, but more so a desire. But death comes in many forms, and the emotional impact of not having sex or having healthy sex can dramatically impact on your emotional well-being. So we're going to have that frank discussion about sex. You're listening to ReThreading Madness. I'm Bernadine Fox, and today I am chatting with Jessica Garner, who is somebody who teaches about sex. And I'm going to just hand it over to her for her to tell you more about what that means and what that looks like. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Bernie. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So tell folks who you are.
Well, I'm Jessica Garner. I'm from Powell River on the Sunshine Coast in BC, north of Vancouver. And I used to be a registered nurse. I'm no longer doing that anymore. What I do now is I teach adults how to have sex, basically, because I realized that the entire world is doing it incorrectly, which can be traced back to pornography, organized religion. So basically what people are doing with sex is I call it poking, like it's in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. And what it actually should look like is what a lot of us started doing anyway when we first became sexually active as teenagers. It should look more basically like dry humping, but it's you insert once and then hump. So basically I had this epiphany and I just realized that it was something I didn't know. Like I'm 36 now, and I just knew something was missing in sex. Like everyone seemed to be struggling. Everyone seems to enjoy sex and to want to connect with themselves or a partner in the bedroom. But it seemed like even though, porn was becoming more popular and mainstream, you could just see that relationships between people, like men, women, anyone, non-binary people, like anyone, it's just people didn't know how to connect. Sex is I always found it fascinating. So from when I was like 18 until now, like up until about 2 years ago, I just wanted to learn about it. I wanted to learn everything I could about sex. So I like read books, taught myself, and I had actually given up because I just found that any avenue, any area that I looked in, I just found that there was still something missing. And then it basically was about 2 years ago, just by like random chance, I was watching something that Betty Dodson. So Betty Dodson is one of the most well-known sex educators in modern day history. Betty Dodson is the one who I believe it was the 60s, she was the one that would hold workshops where women would look at their vulvas in the mirror, and she first introduced Hitachi magic wands to women, so they would have like self-pleasuring circles and whatnot. So anyway, just by chance, I had completely given up, and just by chance, I was watching, it was an episode of Goop, and Betty Dodson was on, and I was like, why am I even watching this? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, everyone just talks about, like, I just was very frustrated. And anyway, I just remember Betty saying to Gwyneth Paltrow, because Gwyneth was she's like, we love vaginas, something to that effect.
Right.
And Betty stopped her, and she was like, vulva, like it's the vulva. And she was like, not the vagina is the birth canal only. All the pleasure comes from the vulva, which includes, like, it's basically the clitoris. Like, It's pretty much the clitoris. And there was just a moment that it just kind of hit me. And I just kind of realized, it just triggered this, I guess, domino effect, where I realized, like, we're all taught that humans, all of us, we start as just a human in the womb. Mm-hmm. And then we all have the exact same parts. It's just they're just arranged a little bit differently, depending on hormones and whatnot, but we all have the exact same parts. So we all have this exact same sex organ. It's just arranged differently. So when you actually look at what we're taught in school and whatnot, it's this whole, women have like a baby hole. I like to say baby hole just because I find people kind of, their eyes glaze over when they hear like vagina or clitoris, and they stop listening. So it's women, people think that the woman's sex organ is the baby hole, and with men that it's the penis, but it's not true. We all have one, like the one and only sex organ. I like to say you either got an innie, outie, or an in-betweeny. Right. And so it's basically just a rearranged differently. So when you so people are basically aiming for the wrong thing. Women think that they're broken because they're having, like, it feels great to dry hump when they're teenagers. And then they go on to have sex and they're like, it feels like nothing. Am I broken? Because they are taught, like, everyone is taught that they should be feeling sensation in the baby hole, but it's not the baby hole. And then men think that they can't do a good job because, well, one, a lot of them unfortunately have been circumcised, which it is like non-medically indicated circumcision it is a sex ritual. It is genital mutilation. Yeah. And there's a huge movement. I had no idea about it. I learned about it when I was in nursing school, like a decade ago. And so you have men that are being circumcised. And when you look into that, it came from like the Quakers. They wanted to reduce like boys like from masturbating. So circumcision does that. It decreases sexual function and feeling. And then you have the women who are being told like their sex organ it's the baby hole, and they should be getting the pleasure from the baby hole. Right. But it feels like nothing. And the reason is because it's a baby hole. Right. Babies come out of there. That's why there's not much feeling. The baby hole is really just a way to, like, in sex, like intercourse, like it's just, the baby hole is just a different way to get at the sex organ. But the one and only sex organ, and this is just, like I always say, this is just the simplified look at it. This is the baseline that none of us got. There's only one sex organ. We have the exact same sex organ. So it's basically the same thing. It's just arranged a little bit differently. Right. So it's only you can just see, I have demo on my YouTube where I actually saw.
Yeah, I saw the one on TikTok, actually. I don't know. I assume you are on YouTube as well, but I haven't seen that. Yeah. But I saw the one on TikTok where you basically took a hot dog and sliced it in two and showed how it's basically the same. It's just rearranged differently. And I encourage everybody to go find Jessica's demonstration of a hot dog and how, male and female sex genitalia comes out of that. It was a wonderful thing to see, just because, as you say, it is just so simple and easy to understand at that point. So one of the things we were going to talk about here was how sex and mental health interweave. And I have some ideas, but I'm certainly no expert on it. But I wanted to talk about sex as not as a means of helping mental health necessarily, but how does mental health and sex intertwine?
So, I mean, and you and I briefly touched on it before in conversation. The first, when all of us, we all come from the same place, what is the first thing that babies are, that happens to babies when they're born is it's skin to skin.
Right.
Like skin to skin is the most important, like that physical connection with another human is the most, it regulates us. It's self-soothing. It's very important. So you basically, what I have seen, so with my background, I was in healthcare 13 years total, nursing for, I think it was about 8 before I left. And so I did work in psychiatry, worked in mental health, like community health. So I would see clients for a lot of the time it was crisis counseling. And a lot of the time I would try to find a way, like when you talk to people about self-soothing, if you look it up online, it's like, take a bath, eat a snack, blah, blah, blah. But
Right.
this is kind of the problem where you just see this huge gap is the number one thing is, well, it's skin on skin, but really it's self-pleasuring. A lot of us, the way that we like would self-regulate, self-soothe as babies is we would self-pleasure ourselves. It's very natural, normal to do that. Like it's one of the most effective ways to release stress, blah, blah, blah. But this is where you can kind of see a lot of the issues that are just perpetuated in our society, like that we have to deal with, is this whole, where it comes from, the circumcision, everything, the reason why everyone's poking, it's from, and not from God or the universe, it's just organized religion. So that's a huge piece. So we are experiencing a mental health crisis everywhere globally. And I do, from what I saw working in mental health and just being on my own journey of, self-discovery and whatnot, the world absolutely, like the state of this anxiety, depression, absolutely, the issues, the problem absolutely does. A big piece of it stems from that not often said, but implied, that sex is bad. It's dirty. Only bad people do it. The stigmatization of it. So it's almost like there is this void. It's like this void, and it's just all become such a mess. And so for me, what I have found, the way to actually kind of slowly, because I mean, as well, it's all steeped in trauma because of this. Like this disconnect created a lot of trauma, and that trauma you see it manifests as like chronic illnesses, like fibromyalgia, like psychological conditions, disorders, which we are experiencing like a pandemic of as well. And so the piece that how I see what I teach fitting in, and a huge reason why I decided to leave like my previous profession, is because so that I can speak freely about this and say, hey, you started as an orgasm. We are sexual beings from the moment we come into this world. We are sexual beings until we leave this world. It's like, that is the missing piece. That is the missing piece, and why so many of us feel disconnected, not only from ourselves, but others. And so my message is basically, sex is the cheapest It's the cheapest, best form of entertainment. And Tantra, and trauma-informed Tantra in particular, which I discovered, the school that I study at right now, I'm just doing my Tantra teacher training. It's for sexologist designation, but I don't even know if I'll use it. It's more just I wanted to learn. But Canada actually has the one and only Tantra trauma-informed school, the only government accredited Tantra. It's called Institute of Authentic Tantra Education. And it was started by Davy Ward. She is in Kelowna now. She was in, her and her husband were in Vancouver for years. And the work that they are doing is phenomenal. And the reason why I think Tantra isn't the one and only way, but the fact that it's trauma informed, because when you have disability, anyone, all of us experience trauma in our life. All of us absolutely are living with sexual trauma for many different reasons, but so that can create just a block for people.
Would you say you're a sex expert?
I've been called a sexpert. So
well, that's
I don't know what I'd be called. I'm a sex advice person. I don't know.
Well, and we're here talking about sex, how it impacts on our mental health. You mentioned before this trauma-informed Tantra school. Is that what you're calling it?
Yeah. So it's a government accredited. It's the one and only government accredited Tantra organization, Tantra teaching organization body in the entire world. And it was started by Davy Ward. So she is one of, I think she's the main founder, and the reason why that's so important is because, as anyone knows, so say if you want to explore your sexuality and you just start following your curiosity, you have to be very careful, because it's a minefield out there, because it really is, because sex has been shunned and, stigmatized. It's kind of become its own black market in a way. So a lot can happen in the shadows. And if you even go, if you go out looking to heal yourself sexually, a lot of the time you can, unfortunately, hook up with the wrong people, or people who are, saying that it's sexual healing, but it's, they're exploiting the notion of it. So, for example, if you look into Tantra, there's a lot of groups, even on Facebook, where it's Tantra abuse. So the reason why, when I was looking into this, IATE, so the Institute of Authentic Tantra Education, it was government accredited. So it's it is accredited through the BC Ministry of Education. It's a legitimate school. You get accredited, and it's trauma informed. So there's support when you're going through it, because a lot of people, which I think we're learning in these, post Me Too days, a great amount of people have experienced sexual trauma. And so when you go into that, you just have to be careful.
I do a lot of work around therapy abuse. And of course, what that means is that clients who are working with a therapist who then exploits them on various levels. And one of the worst ones is sexual exploitation. And so when we talk about trauma-informed Tantra and sex around mental health, of course, to me, there's a huge red flags, and part of me just wants to say, no. Like black and white thinking, therapy and sex should never come into the same room. But I think that is probably nearsighted. And I do know that, when you look at the ways in which sex impacts on our mental health and how it can be a positive to our mental health, I think that maybe that is nearsighted. I know you're not a sexologist, but you are learning this thing that does look like it covers those bases. How does a therapist deal with a sexually traumatized client without going past the barriers? how do they do this in a healthy way?
That's a very good question. And I actually will be a sexologist when I'm done at the end of this course. So I'm a sexologist in training. So basically, and I actually asked that question last week. So how the way you can kind of look at it is, it's similar to with therapy, in the sense that therapy is basically what therapy should be. Is you have someone who's coming into your, the sacred safe space, the therapeutic space that you create. And then all a therapist really does is they kind of help shine a light, like they hold a mirror to you and kind of help to catch the little sparks of light that are in you. And so it kind of creates this positive feedback loop. So you're helping, like you're giving space to a person to help rebuild their flame, their fire in life. Because a lot of the time, like that's what all trauma does, is it's just layers, like it creates layers between our flame and life. So basically what happens with sex therapy is the same thing. So for example, you would have, and it's different. Like, so a lot of it is like you're never in a situation where it's that, like, there's always that professional boundary. So like you're never having sex with your clients. I think people don't understand what it is too. Like you have like demos, you show people, you basically demonstrate to people how they can spend time with their body, and you give them tips, but it's just like if you were going for a gynecological exam or like a prostate exam, it's not a sexual and should not be a sexual experience. So It's about boundaries. It becomes dangerous when there is no regulatory body, such as a professional college, that therapists have to answer to. So that is where it's very important for, to have these regulatory bodies for any therapist, really. And that's where you do see an issue, especially now with this mental health crisis. And, sex therapy it falls under that as well. It's just a different type of therapy. So that's where you see right now, we're kind of in this crisis where people need someone to hold space for them and shine that, hold a mirror for them to help reconnect with their light. But right now, anyone is allowed to do that. And so it just creates the perfect situation for a predator to prey on an already vulnerable populations as a whole. The people being the wounded, or people who are at that point, in life, who go to seek help from someone. It creates the perfect storm to exploit and take advantage.
And to just add sexual trauma onto whatever it is.
To add sexual trauma onto it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is why the only place that I recommend, and I believe I'm very spiritual, I'm not religious. I believe that there was a reason, like I was meant to be a nurse and experience, having to go through being a professional, what that meant to answer to a professional body, yada, 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 because then it helped me find these, like I could navigate the world and pick and choose and see. Like, thing that shocked me was when I started, like, I just love following my curiosity. And when, like, there are tantra, sexual, all these, like, sex magic, all these different types of sex therapy classes, courses, whatnot around the world. And it blew my mind when I found out that this IATE was the one and only government accredited program in the entire world. And it is the work that they are doing. And I'm not sponsored by them at all. This is just the school that I found, which I couldn't believe that it was in BC, like my home province. The work that they are doing is profound. And so this IATE, And just one little example for you is my first instructor, like, so she taught me for the first half of my program. She's a judge. She was a judge. She now teaches tantra, but she is a judge. So it is of the same professional standard as when I was going through nursing school. So that is the thing, is having regulatory bodies, because absolutely, you're absolutely correct. It's like playing Minesweeper when you go out, people that don't know, or if you don't, and especially if you have, like, if you live with a disability and you are already a vulnerable population, it absolutely it kind of adds fuel to the whole fire if you're already experiencing like sexual trauma and whatnot.
Well, and it sounds to me, if I'm getting you right, it's not just experiencing sexual trauma, but we all sort of, unless you're very blessed in some way to live with a certain set of parents, we've also all been growing up in a society here in Canada that does not teach us about sex, and it doesn't allow us to be little children who are sexual beings. I get that. Of course, the only people taking advantage of that are child molesters, and they see it, but then they use it against the kids, and that's terrible. We have some essential human needs in our lives. One is food and shelter and water. And I dare say sex, from what you're saying, is an essential human need. Am I correct?
Absolutely. You started as an orgasm, as I said.
So, and I did a little bit of reading, and it seems to me that, like you say, I mean, sex is your best free entertainment, but it may also be your best free self means of medicating. I smoked for 30 years. I was a horrible cigarette smoker. By the time I left smoking, I was into 3 packs a day and 3 medications to breathe. And but I learned a lot about the brain and dopamine and how, addiction impacts on your dopamine, and how it's, self-regulating in itself, because if you take a hit of nicotine off your cigarette, your dopamine is released, you feel good. And if you don't do that, you feel really, really bad. So you're encouraged in your mind to, the craving becomes, go and have another cigarette. But from what I'm gathering is that sex also produces chemicals as well, much in the same way nicotine does.
Yes, absolutely. Dopamine is absolutely one of them as well. And so what you can see that we are experiencing in society is, so there's basically, like what I say, there's 3 ways that people seem to approach sex. One is, say they're, they look at it as dirty, so they just kind of try to ignore when they're turned on, and they just try to avoid it. Or the other people, they chase the dopamine. So that's what they say in I don't know if we even call it the lifestyle. It's basically, in the tantra world, it's called chasing like genital sneezes, because it's just like an orgasm is just like a little genital sneeze, but it doesn't really, like, that's it.
Right.
So that's when you see people who are quote unquote sex addicts. They're not actually addicted to sex. It's just, that's their drug of choice,
right.
Which again makes sense, because it's free. Like, it's free. The supply is free. You got if you want to use other people. So the third, though, and that's where tantra, and again, tantra is just one of the ways to, approach and connect with your sexual energy, which is our life force. So the difference is, when you just become curious and say you want to connect with your sexual energy, which absolutely has that dopamine component as well, but it is because it's our life force. And I call this energy our inner horny pervert. The reason why a lot of the terms I use too are meant to shock people, and it is meant to take words back, because someone who is connected with their sexuality was, up until recently, and still is, seen as like a pervert.
Right.
And this is like, abusers aside. So because because we all started as an orgasm, because our life force is sexual energy, the whole point then is, and all your practice is just taking time and taking space to actually be in that energy. So what does that look like? What that looks like is, rather than, because everyone self-pleasures, everyone masturbates, the person that you will have the most sex with in this life is yourself. So you got to be the best lover you ever had. And people aren't doing that. So you have to then take the time to, not even when you're turned on, just have it, take the time, make the space to connecting with that energy, to spend time with that energy. So what that looks like is, rather than when you're turned on, when your sexual energy is, flamed up, when your sexual energy is, is building in you, it's to take that time, and rather than turning on pornography, and then just moving yourself to orgasm very quickly, which results in a genital sneeze. And the reason why we do that is because all of us were shamed, and our parents did the best they could. It was just the world they were brought into. But I say, everyone masturbates, and this is the tendency. We masturbate quick, quiet, quick, tight, and quiet. And so you'll see that when people are self-pleasuring, it's quick, tight, and quiet. You can't make any noise. You shouldn't be doing this. Get it over and done with. You're looking at porn. The porn is abuse-based, which shows an imbalance of power. Why? Because the imbalance of power and abusing that power imbalance causes, it helps release the dopamine. But the way that you get around that is, well, you're a sexual being. So all you have to do is, when you're turned on, is you lock the door, you make a little nest for yourself, and you take time to actually be with your body. And the way you can look at it is, it's like when you're turned on, it's like a little light, like a little ruby starts to glow a little bit. And then your job is to basically hold space for your own ruby. And you'll see the light just kind of, the whole point is for you to spend time with that energy and spend time with yourself, exploring your body, learning, what feels good for your body, respecting your edges when they come up. And that's releasing the trauma, and it will come up. And that's why a trauma-informed practice is a good guide to help you manage and navigate through when an edge comes up. So that's the point of trauma-informed. And so it's basically all it is all this journey really is you're just making space for that part of you in your life. Because when you came into this world, again, you're a sexual being. We're sexual beings from the moment we get, come into this world. You were probably a little baby, humping your hand or humping a toy or humping the floor. And some adult who was born in this, society was don't do that, and sent you the message, don't do that. So all you're doing is basically it's reparenting pretty much. Is you are an adult now, you have your own space, which is boundaries. And then all you're doing is you are making that space, you're setting space for your red ruby to just start shining a bit more. So you get that question a lot, especially from especially from survivors of sexual assault, sexual trauma, sexual abuse, is they feel like it was taken from them. But no, because no one can ever take it from you, because that is the essence of who you are. That's who you are. So all it is there was just layers put between you and the red ruby. So all it is just re-stretching, giving space to your red ruby. And so when people think of Tantra or these sexual practices, they think of chasing the dopamine, where it's dirty, it's just it is that dirty, dark, low vibrational, beating each other up and calling it sex, what you see in porn right now. But what it actually is it's not actually, when you're in practice, it's not a sexual exchange between, say you're with a practitioner, say someone's like, holding space for you to give you like a yoni massage or like a lingam massage, like it's not. So it's basically the same thing where what a Tantra practitioner, and not all Tantra, like this is if they actually are a practitioner. Like I'm not interested in doing that for people, but if say you found a Tantra practitioner who provided like yoni massage or lingam massage, it's not for a sexual release. What it is they're basically helping you. They create that space for you, that little nest, and they hold up the mirror. They hold up the mirror and they help you bring out your ruby. And say if you are receiving that and you are turned on, and say you are uncomfortable with that energy, so you reach out to try to connect with them, the definition of a professional is they block you, and they block you with the mirror. They hold the mirror and they're like, no, like this is your space. That is, you are crossing a boundary. So they respect that professional boundary. And so that is the definition of a professional relationship with professional boundaries. So it's basically, you can walk the path yourself if you feel safe to do it. But if you don't, or if you think it might be more fun and enjoyable to walk it with others, then that's when it's fun to just follow your curiosity and see what these options for sex therapy are, and just make sure that it's a reputable, safe source. And so when we think of therapy, when we think of people experiencing mental health issues, like, which is distressing, anxiety, depression, a lot of that it comes from the trauma, which creates those layers between you and others. It distances it. So the thing that's so beautiful, again, because sex is a free form of entertainment. As long as you're safe, honest, and respectful, you can do whatever the heck you want. But so if you can find a safe organization, a safe space to do it in, so safe being that you are safe, working on your edges, bringing out your red ruby yourself, or you're safe with the person who's helping you, or you're safe in the group that, is creating that space for you to do it, then it is one of the best. It's a cheap, absolutely cheap, and one of the most effective ways to like heal yourself, work on your own trauma, be your own guru, be your own therapist, because it is cheap. So that is why I think that it's such an important piece of it's such an important piece. And I think just from the period of time when I was, basically acting as holding space for others in the sense, like in a professional, like nursing sense, and, quote unquote, counseling therapy sense, is a lot of the time I would try to find ways to encourage, like, because you go through coping strategies with people, because it's basically whenever we get triggered, our inner child, who's usually about like 5 years old at the time, it's like having your inner child it's like having a child, a 5-year-old that's freaking out. And so all you basically have to do is you think of 3 things that you can cycle through. And you keep, like you would with a kid, if a 5-year-old kid came up to you and was like crying and freaking out, well, what would you do? You'd feed it, offer it like a snack, maybe like draw the kid a bubble bath, or you'd like read them books in bed, and then you do that to yourself. That's reparenting. But a big thing, like a huge self-soothing skill, again, that is wonderful. Again, which is wonderful for us on so many levels. It's the best thing about being alive as a human, is having an orgasm. And so it's so hard, because I think that, like, when people would have partners, I would try to find ways to encourage them, like skin on skin with your partner, or if someone brought it up, but people never did, it was just to try to kind of encourage people to spend that time with themselves in that way, because when at the root of a lot of it is sexual trauma, a
Right.
lot of it absolutely is. And so that was the piece where I got to the point where I was like, you know what, this sex is medicine. And that's something that the founder of IAT, Davy Ward, says, and is like her motto and whatnot. Sex absolutely is medicine if it's used in a safe, trauma-informed context. And
Right.
for me to be able to be able to speak openly about it, it was time for me to leave my profession, and which brings us to today. And that is my message, which is basically sex is medicine. And it's very simple. And I just give them 3 steps how to do it. So that is
wonderful.
where I am today.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was very informative. I have 1,000 questions and no more time, but thank you for
That's totally
coming.
fine.
And I might have you come back, just talk about this a little bit more so that we can address some of those other questions. But thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Bernie. Lovely chatting with you.
You've been listening to ReThreading Madness. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I've been speaking with sex expert Jessica Garner. You're listening to ReThreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I've been speaking with sex expert Jessica Garner. Sex boosts our serotonin, and anyone who's been depressed understands the importance of serotonin in our brains. A lack of sex can be detrimental on your sense of self-worth and confidence. Sex, in particular, the orgasm, helps people sleep as it releases prolactin, a hormone that helps you relax. It also releases oxytocin, a hormone that initiates sleep, and a lack of sleep can impact negatively on your mental health because we need REM sleep to not go crazy. Sex, specifically the physical intimacy of sex, also releases endorphins, which are transmitters around happiness. Sounds good, right? I think so. My thanks to Jessica Garner for our discussion around sex and its importance to our mental health. If you have any questions that Jessica and I didn't answer, and or questions that came up because of this conversation, don't hesitate to write us and ask. I will get Jessica back on to answer them for you. Most importantly, and as always, our thanks goes out to you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. I'm Bernadine Fox, and you've just listened to ReThreading Madness, the podcast that dares to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program or want to share your story or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. If you enjoyed this show, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or some